our churches are doing the Sterling Volunteers, and they're putting every single one of their volunteers in a volunteer meeting, according to NAD working policy, as those who deal directly with minors and those who are in a church officer or leader capacity, ministry leader capacity, anybody. And what I like to say is, when in doubt, check them out. So don't question it. Then after that, because the check or it won't see everything, we have what's called a 6-month rule. And what this means is that when somebody comes into your church, you don't allow them to have any significant amount of responsibility for about 6 months. And why is that? Because it allows time for their reputation to catch up with them. Because sometimes people move from church to church for a reason. And so keep that in mind. Number 3, 2-person rule. Always make sure, always make sure that you have at least 2 adults when you're with minors, or that you're not alone. Because if a minor comes out and says something, you have no defense if you were alone. So, of course, number 1 is their safety. We want to make sure that our people are safe within our walls, but it goes both ways. It goes both ways. And we also want to make sure that we have an open door, glass window policy in place, where people, when they come and they're talking to you privately, you want to make sure that they're visible at all times to the outside world. So that way, no types of allegations. And this stuff happens. And some of you pastors have experienced it, and I know firsthand that you've experienced, if your church members would have followed these guidelines, the problems that have been experienced would not have happened. So I want to emphasize that and make that very clear, that this is something that's very important. And again, we have copies of this back on the back table, so I hope that everybody gets their copy. Wanted to also remind you, for those who are new or newer, about 2 years ago we sent out a memo to every single church and school saying that 15-passenger vans are never, ever to be utilized. And that means purchased, rented, or borrowed for any reason whatsoever. By now, none of us should have a van, a 15-passenger van in our precincts. None of us should have that. Also, if you remember, some strange guy coming around asking to look at your premises. How many people remember that? And I know some people called me and asking me, okay, who is this weird guy that's coming and saying, hey, we want to check out your premises? Well, I'm sorry if I didn't do a good enough job of telling you ahead of time. I tried. But yes, Verisk, who was hired by ARM, they're done with their job, and I have all of those reports available. And I plan on sending them out as soon as I can, but we have a lot of stuff to do. But if you want it sooner than later, please contact us, and we'll be happy to send you that report. Again, I have all of them available. And one heads up, due to the losses, the big losses that we've had in the last 2 years, and y'all are well aware, I think, of what those losses were. Your property insurance is going to be a little bit higher this year than it was even last year. However, the good news is, because we're on kind of a 5-year window with our look back for losses, in about 2 or 3 years, ARM is going to be able to negotiate better prices for us. So it's going to, if nothing else happens, this is about probably as bad as it's going to get this year. But and this is for budgeting. This is to keep in mind for budgeting. In about 2 or 3 years, you're going to see this cost of your premiums start to go down if, of course, if we don't have any other major losses in our, hopefully, by God's grace, no more major losses as far as fires or anything is concerned. So with that, I don't want to belabor anything, but I am done. So thank you, and have a happy and wonderful, and I see, well, I guess I'm not going so quick. Pastor Jacobson.
I understand that the increase is right around 12%, is that correct?
Well, there's some ways we can mitigate that. So yeah, it's around that ballpark, but I think from last year, it's up about, it'll be up about 4%, but don't quote me on that. Don't quote me on that. And it's a little bit different.
Okay, ours is about 12%.
You're talking about from the or last year's, right? Yeah, because you haven't got billed for right, and that was the biggest jump. So I think this year's not going to be quite as big as it was last year. But it still will go up, right?
I guess one of my concerns is if we're having an increase, are we actually getting the insurance that covers replacement value on our properties?
Yes.
I'm quite concerned that it's really not keeping up. But I understand that's why the visit was made, but are the new policies really reflecting those values?
Well, that's up to you. Every year we send out your SOVs for the churches and the schools to update. So that way if you're undervalued, we want you to tell us and send in a marked up copy, and we do that every single year.
Well, one of the issues is getting a real price on what a rebuild and replacement is.
Right.
So,
And that's always going to be a guesstimate, because if there's a major loss like a fire sweep through, cost of materials, cost of service can go up, and we've seen that already. So it's kind of a hard thing, and some people, and a big reason we leave it in your court is because sometimes you might not want to rebuild as much as it was prior to a loss. Like, let's say your membership shrank and considerably over the years, you might not want to build as big of a place. So, you know, we kind of leave that up to you to make sure. But these various reports will help for a general assessment for your values, for sure. Yes, I saw another hand over here, sir.
Yeah, this might help another passion on this thing. So the statement of values, you know, I looked at it and it's like, well, we didn't add anything in, so I just signed it. Until I discovered that the statement of values are built on a rebuilt per square foot cost,
Yes.
which is not on that form. So if you want to determine your statement of value, you need to find out in your area what about the average cost per square foot is to build. And then you figure out from that how much you want to build, and that will tell you about where you want to cover. We fit into the category of one church that was just the last point that you made, that when I explained this to them, we were at $125 in the Napa Valley, and it's supposed to be up like 300.
Yeah.
So, but the church decided not to do anything because we've had almost 30 members die.
Exactly.
In a small church of 4.5 years and more to come. And, you know, other things are keeping even. They said, well, we may not want to build this big.
Right.
So,
Excellent. Thank you, Pastor McMarty, for bringing that out. That's a really good piece of advice. Look at your cost per square foot. You can do that by looking at your replacement value divided by the square foot that is on the SOVs and see in your area. Yes, sir.
just a question. Can you add what that value is per square foot on that form so that it will trigger cash, because that's what they need to look at? And because it's not on the form, most of us will just say, oh, we haven't done anything in terms of years. So.
Well, it's ARM that creates the Statement of Values, Advanced Risk Management. We could do more to that effect of letting you know maybe on a more personal basis. That's a really good idea, and we could certainly look at that for sure. I don't know how much time we have, but I see another hand.
So what is the relationship between that statement of values form and the VeriSign, audit or assessment that was done?
Yeah.
You said there may be some useful information on there that can help us fill out the form more accurately.
Absolutely. That's a good question. So what do you ask is, what about the Verisk assessment? How does that correlate with our statement of values? Without you doing nothing, it's not going to affect it at all. All that assessment is to tell you where where you're at currently, and it's up to you to decide and say, hey, we want to up the values according to whatever.
But it will give us something.
Right, something to work with, some tangibles.
Something like an appraisal value.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. It's for your info to do what you want. So I think I'm probably out of time, but any more questions? All right, one more.
Maybe not a question, but when it really would be helpful if you guys give us some heads up that somebody's coming out. This last time, the guy came out, and I didn't know him from anybody, the secretary knew nothing. And we've got school going on there, and this is a safety issue.
Right.
So I don't know who this is, and I can trust, a little bit, but I purposely went around with him, and I stuck around. I had another appointment that I canceled in order to do that. And I would deeply appreciate some heads up.
Yeah, no, I agree, but actually I did send out, I can't remember exactly what it was on, I think it was an email that it was stated on there that this would be happening, so, but I could have maybe done more to that effect, for sure. All right, well, happy 2020, and may it be blessed and fruitful.